Bonjour à toutes et à tous.
Good morning, everybody. Before my speech, I would like to introduce you to our vaccine, which is near Lyon in France. It is an industrial city which symbolizes the first industrial revolution, because it was where the first intercontinental train was created in continental Europe in order to extract the coal. But it is not a town that was built just for the mining activity, because it was already there. There was already some industrial city, like the one for the production of silk in Ruban, and another proto-industry for the iron production, for the production of knives and all the tools that you can find in households, and also weapons, which is one of the most important industry. I would like now to tell you that I direct two museums. One, which is the Museum of the Mining, which is like 10 minutes away from the central square, and the Museum of Industry, which is a museum of all the industrial activities in our town. It is a museum pole which is dedicated to the industrial activity in the framework of the project for the museums which are managed by the state, and it was renovated in order to reconcentrate all our efforts to protect our industrial heritage. In this new project, which is cultural and scientific at the same time, there is a very important part which concerns the management of the different exhibitions, and we must say that the digitalization allowed us to manage all the exhibitions in a better way. And we are working, I will present you two projects. We have two new tools, and we will speak about the virtual museum, which is a project which is new, because we have some online projects, and we realized that we could put all different objects online, and therefore we decided to have a technician, an expert, and we concentrate all the elements for the valorization and the protection of all our heritage. In order to better understand what I am speaking about, I will show you some slides. Here you can see the Curio, the Museum of the Mining, which is created since 2011. It's about 6,000 meters. It's a building that has stopped working since 1963 in a mining basin which stopped functioning in 1923, because they decided so in the south of France. They wanted to have such a site in order to spread the memory about these activities, and also to show the value of this area and to spread the knowledge of the activity that was there. This decision in 1983 was taken against the political will that wanted to cancel this heritage. And this is the only site that survived, and it has become the emblematic site for this memory. So it is a site, as I said, of 6,000 square meters. There are some machines. As I said, it stopped working in 1973, but it was even limited before then. And as you can see, there are some machine rooms, and then there is a gallery which is being rebuilt, so the visitor can actually see. You can take the elevator in order to go to the gallery, and there are some guided visits. We are also trying to create some digital virtual visits, but this is just a very immersive experience. During the COVID period, we were not able to open the gallery because of all the measures, but we reopened the site and we lost 70% of our visits because, of course, the people could not visit the gallery. Even if it was a historical site and a very important one, it's useless. But this is reality. We must face it. So even if it's just something that has been recreated, is important because it allows the visitors to relive the experience of the people that have been working there. It is a gallery that goes back in times, and you can see the history. During the visit, in 300 meters, you can really visit the history of the site. And this can show the sensibilization of the animal protection, because you could see the way that people used to work and also how the horses were treated. In this slide, you can see some other images. We have more or less 65 visitors per year, and there are more or less 100 people working there. There are some temporary exhibitions. There was one which was presented just before COVID, so was not. We had to stop, of course, but it's been useful to learn from experience. The first museum of Saint-Étienne, it's an object museum, 45,000 in total. 35,000 visitors per year, and it's not a production site, but you can see the difference between an industry museum, industrial museum, and an art museum. Because in the first one, you can really see the industrial production. Coriot, the mining museum, is not called an industrial museum. These exhibitions are very well integrated in the research network, and they concern some exhibitions for weapons. There are some very interesting objects. I do have the license for the weapons for this museum, and also bicycles. Some exhibitions. So the exhibitions are divided in 3 floors, and there is no competition between them. There is no transversality about the know-how. You know that in order to produce ribbons, you need mechanic tools. And for the weapons, the mechanics can be very technological. Sometimes you have, some small pieces like little wheels and other small objects. And the audience doesn't really make the link between the three exhibitions. And these new tools allow us to have a different approach. It's a museum where we have also other exhibitions, temporary ones. We do not limit our exhibitions to weapons or the silk and ribbons. We present other objects, and we have 200 textile machines in the stock. We cannot show everything, and we also have some machines for the production of weapons.
Le musée, Curio Musée de la Mine possède un...
Our museum possesses a tool implemented at the time of the establishment of this building, a space, an area dedicated to a museum. This space was not there until 2014. There was the site, of course, but there was no collection in it. In this museum, there is a space, an area, as you can see, which is a wall of images. A very small, immersive area, of course, but I wanted to take it as an example. This is what I call the passive immersion. You can see on this photograph that the public sits in front of a very big 18-meter long wall with a series of images and a sound and a speech which is being pronounced. This is a very academic scheme, listed, pouring over knowledge, which the public is very happy to listen to at the end of the very long walking visit. But this is not so much an immersion. This is something more intellectual in kind, and it is not designed for a plurisensory or real immersion adventure. And this was in 2014. This was really the start of our endeavor. But this specific exhibition, this wall of images, was very welcomed by the public, and it's been the case so far. Then there was a key change in our practices. Whatever your opinion on it, this is the coming about of spectacular effects, cultural effects, the cultural immersive effects, as we can call them. L'Atelier de Lumière was the first of its kind in France. It was in the Bout-de-Provence region, and Culture Espace, who was managing the Beau Castle, could not manage to attract a public. It was a private endeavor, but they had not enough public, so they decided to use lights to light quarries on the sidelines of the castle, and to highlight the environment for the public. And many artists participated to this, and they used pieces of art such as Van Gogh, for example, and there is an immersion of the public in a global context, and they are disconnected from any reality, because those dimensions are, of course, much bigger than mere paintings, the regular paintings, and it calls upon many other senses, not only sight and hearing. This is what we call equilibriumception, how you orient yourself in the environment. the public is the feeling that he's an actor, but still is free to move about, and so he feels like being part of this exhibition. There is no connection whatsoever with materiality. This is, in my opinion, something which is at the very center of this race to digital immersion, which is, of course, very much interesting. But at the end of the day, is now standard. There are 6 million people, visitors per year. There is in Paris, Marseille, there was one in New York, and the Grand Palais just created the immersive Grand Palais. These on very different dynamics. For example, in Paris, there is an exhibition on Tintin, a presentation of the moon and space in other exhibitions. Whatever you might think of it, it deeply changed the relation the public has to the places they visit. They expect to be motion in their visits now. The choice of Musée Stéphanois for the Museum of Art and Industry, we are reviewing the situation to add more transversality. And the first room we created is an introductory room. What does it mean? We wanted it to be non-educational. We wanted to call upon the sensitivity of and the senses of the visitors, of course, sight, hearing, but we also gave a lot of importance to the quality of sound. We wanted it to be dynamic, and the fact that the sound had to leave room for imagination. So this is a series of images being displayed to create connections between the different connections, to give a sensible understanding of what visitors are going to see in the museum. We tried to add materiality by using objects, for example, a bicycle or a roll of tissue, and paintings to make a connection with the several parts of the museum. And those images are displayed on the screens, and to all topic there is a digital sound associated to each specific part of the museum. But in this soundtrack, we also decided to add sounds connected to the use of those objects. For example, the use of a bicycle, it's rather easy to do so. Many things can be done, but the use of a weapon, for example, is more problematic. And we decided to for example, have hunting dogs, sounds, dogs hunting, and sounds of shooting. But children were afraid of it, but the adults were telling us that for the children, having the sound of a hunting dog barking and the sound of rifles being shot was a bit too thrilling for the children. So we realized that the sound-based approach in this immersive room was not what was expected by the public in a museum. They were not expecting the real representation of a weapon being used, even though we have an exhibition with weapons. So there is a gap between what the public is feeling and, on the other hand, what they expect to see in the museum. It is still, however, satisfactory because this approach, which is non-intellectualized, of course, this is something which goes very fast, it is extremely dynamic, but it's an answer to a crisis of attention from the public. They are increasingly less ready to have a real meeting with objects, according to the new edition of OSIM, by the way. But it was for us a way to have a sensitive approach to the museum and to make a connection between objects and sounds. For example, the sound of a bicycle going about in the public space. And then the second space I wanted to present was the project which we called Fire Damp Explosion. When I took office in 2018, I was told that they wanted a revolution, and they used the image of a fire damp explosion. I did not know exactly. I know what a fire damp is and what is a fire damp explosion, but we did not exactly know what to do, and we've been wondering so far what to do. And this is with a team of former miners that we worked on it. So we had to decide where to include this fire damp explosion in the museum, and we decided to put it between the contemporary gallery and the history gallery. We had an empty space, and we believe that this would be the best place to put this exhibition on a fire dam explosion. But that might be problematic because, yes, this is a tour guide visit, and there is already immersive experience, but we want it to be without headphones, so fully immersive, and we want the public to have a very sensitive approach. And the of a thermal feeling. We want them to feel the heat, but how having a sensitive approach or feeling of pain and heat. So to achieve this immersive fire damp explosion, I'm trying to go to the next page. Yes, here we are. So we made a sensitive experiment of an explosion, because this is the whole idea. We invited visitors to enter a corridor where they could see a presentation of the history of all fire damp accidents in the coal mining or coal mine history. We did not have a lot of financial means to work on a digital solution, so we decided to work with a very simple tool, a 3D glasses. Well, at the time of immersive headsets, that might be seen as old-fashioned, but it worked very well, notably amongst 35 years of age and above public. They loved it, and we realized that with a very simple solution it was possible to make very interesting things. So the public was visiting this area, plunged in the dark. We worked with an artist on this solution, and they were faced with a screen turned on, and there was a speech from a miner, and suddenly there was a fire damp explosion. So they could see everything flying around. There was no blast, of course, but things were flying around in 3D. And they were really feeling everything which is non-immersive in the 3D headsets possibilities. So after this sensational experience, we wanted to explain what happens when a fire damp explosion happens and the dust taking fire. And then the same film was displayed with a technical description of what had happened, the technical causes of the fire damp explosion, because the problem with such techniques is to be really at the border between a show and cultural or scientific explanation. So the right balance has to be found. It's not always easy. The fire dam explosion space, well, it is the name we have chosen for it, but we will have to change this name. But this is what we try to do in this area, in this fire dam explosion area. We will try to deepen this experiment with scientific explanations, information to achieve something satisfactory. But of course, there are limits, boundaries to what can be done with digital solutions. For example, the price of investment. This is a real issue. A digital room also needs a lot of maintenance, which is very costly. And I'm not even talking about headsets and the feeling of the public when things don't work properly. And for information, we have other digital, more standard digital tools, but they are broken. Most of them are broken, out of order currently. And a member of the public wrote a letter to our elected representative to complain about this. But you know what? That's strange that someone expected to see only digital tools or use only digital tools when they visited a museum, but that's another story. Thank you very much indeed for your attention.